The stranger beside me on the last train kept staring at my reflection in the window. When I finally looked at him, he smiled and said, "You should be more worried about the man sitting behind you." Thank you, Kira, for that 2-sentence horror story. And keep sending them in. We love reading these on the podcast. You never really know the person standing beside you, the voice you hear every day, the face you recognize, the neighbor you wave to. Any of them could be hiding something terrible you never imagined. Because sometimes the most terrifying secrets aren't buried in the dark. They're living right next to you. I'm Blair Bathory, and welcome to the Something Scary podcast. Thanks for joining us as we descend into the darkness together. So, want to hear something scary? The killer beside you. Sometimes the most terrifying things aren't the ones we understand. They're the moments we look back on years later and still can't explain. Like in this experience shared by Kata. I had always been the kind of person people described as idealistic. I was the person who imagined what places would look like before I ever visited them, and created entire versions of people in my head before I ever met them. Looking back, I think that's what's part of what drew me to New York City. I had spent years building a picture of it from books, movies, and stories. I imagined late nights walking through the city, meeting interesting people, discovering some version of myself I hadn't found yet. The reality was a little different. I grew up in a small town surrounded by open fields, gravel roads, and people who knew each other's businesses before you even knew your own. At night, things got quiet, really quiet. Sometimes the loudest thing you could hear was the wind moving through the trees outside my bedroom window. It was peaceful. But it also meant I had no idea what I was walking into. When my acceptance letter came in, I carried it around the house for days. I kept unfolding it and reading it again, like somehow the words might change. My father loaded the last box into the trunk of my old sedan while my mother stood beside him, trying very hard not to cry. Neither of us wanted to admit how big the moment felt. We hugged in the driveway longer than we normally would have. And then I got into the car and drove north, toward the life I had spent years imagining. New York was everything I expected and nothing like I expected. It was loud, it was overcrowded. Everything seemed to be moving with a purpose I didn't understand. People walked quickly, talked quickly, and somehow always knew exactly where they were going. I did not. I was never what anyone would call street smart. My classmates noticed almost immediately. I would stop in the middle of the sidewalks to look up at buildings. I hesitated before crossing busy intersections. I smiled at strangers, which was apparently something you weren't supposed to do. My parents called almost every night. The conversations always ended with the same reminders. Don't get distracted in parking garages. Keep your bag zipped. If someone makes you uncomfortable, trust yourself. Sit in the busiest subway car. Never assume crowded means safe. I laughed most of it off. They worried because I was their only daughter and I was hundreds of miles away from home. But I was almost 25 years old. I felt like I knew what I was doing. Besides, nothing happened. For months, nothing happened. Then, one Friday night, I left a friend's birthday party earlier than everyone else. I had class the next morning and didn't want to show up exhausted. It wasn't particularly late, and the city still felt alive around me. People were spilling out of bars. Music drifted onto the sidewalks. Taxi horns echoed between buildings. It felt completely normal. The subway station was quieter than I expected. A handful of people waited on the platform, most of them staring at their phones or advertisements above the tracks. When the train arrived, I stepped into the closest car right before the doors closed. There were only a few other people inside. A young woman sat across from me between two men wearing dark suits. Another man stood near the doors with headphones on. An older woman sat farther down reading a book. Without thinking much about it, I chose a seat facing them. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I remembered my father's advice. Stay where there are other people. Almost immediately, I felt something was off. The young woman was looking at me. At first, I didn't think much of it. People stare at the subway. Everyone is tired. Everyone zones out. Maybe she wasn't even looking at me. Except she was. She wasn't angry. She wasn't smiling. She just looked completely still. The longer I watched her, the stranger it felt. Her head was tilted slightly to one side, not in a casual way, but in a way that made me uncomfortable without knowing why. I looked around the train car. Nobody else seemed to notice anything. The man beside her stared straight ahead. The woman reading never looked up. The man near the doors continued listening to whatever was playing through his headphones. I looked back. She hadn't moved. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Not scary exactly, just wrong. Like I was seeing something that my brain couldn't quite process. Eventually, almost without realizing I had decided to, I stood up and moved to the other side of the train. Nobody reacted. I looked down at my phone and pretended to read messages, like I was letting my imagination get away from me. Then the train stopped. A young man stepped inside, wearing jeans and a navy jacket. He looked around the car briefly before sitting down, in the exact seat I had just left, directly across from the woman. The doors closed. The train started moving again. Less than a minute later, someone sat beside me. I hadn't heard him approach. His voice was quiet. "Get off at the next stop." I froze. I turned slightly toward him, waiting for him to explain. He didn't. He didn't look at me. He didn't repeat himself. He just sat there staring ahead like he hadn't said anything. Every instinct I had told me to ask what he meant, to demand an explanation, but something about the way he said it made me stop. The train continued through the tunnel. The seconds felt much longer than they should have. When the brakes finally squealed and the train slowed, the man stood up. The doors opened. He stepped onto the platform. And for a moment, I stayed where I was. Then I got up and followed him. The doors closed behind me, and the train disappeared into the darkness. That was when he finally turned around. He looked pale under the station lights. Not frightened exactly, more like someone who had just seen something he desperately wanted to be wrong about. "I'm a trauma surgeon," he said. I didn't know why. That was the first thing he told me. Then he looked back toward the tunnel. The surgeon looked toward the two men and the woman sitting between them. He asked if I had noticed anything strange about her. I nodded. His expression changed. Her neck, he explained, was broken, snapped completely. He worked with trauma patients every day and knew what a fatal injury looked like. The woman on the train was dead. He said he thought he was imagining it until he saw me move away from them. I had noticed something too. They were transporting her, he realized, keeping her upright between them so no one would question it. Neither of us spoke. 3 cars from the front, we saw them. The same 2 men, the same woman between them, her head still resting at that impossible angle. The train passed without stopping. The surgeon stared after it, completely shaken. "That's impossible," I said. "That was our train." I stared at the empty tunnel behind us. "We watched it leave." He shook his head slowly. "No, that train terminates at this station." Whether what happened on that subway was real, supernatural, or simply impossible, one thing is certain: sometimes listening to your instincts can save your life. So tell me, have you ever had a gut feeling that turned out to be right, even when you couldn't explain why? Have you ever had a scary subway experience? Did you ever leave the train to get away? Send us an email at somethingscary@snarled.com. And don't forget to subscribe or follow us wherever you're listening so you never miss a single episode creeping your way. And just a quick update from me. I told you about Comic-Con and all the new things coming out this year that are spooky, scary, and all things creepy. I'm so excited. Make sure to follow me on my socials at Blair Bathory so you see all of my reviews of all of these new TV shows and movies. And also, I may have a new project of my own coming out soon. Sometimes the scariest stories begin with a child telling the truth, like in this account written by Sarah Lukasiewicz. Sometimes I think adults forget what it felt like to be 6 years old. We remember the fear of monsters, but we forget how real the world felt back then. A shadow in the corner wasn't a shadow. A sound downstairs wasn't a pipe settling. It was something waiting. As parents, we teach children to separate imagination from reality. We check under the bed, open the closet, and smile when we tell them there is nothing there. I used to do the same thing with my son, Oliver, until the summer he stopped asking me to look. For almost 2 months, bedtime had become battle. Oliver hated being alone in his room. He would sit beneath his blankets and stare at the space beneath his bed, not afraid, waiting. "There's someone there," he told me one night. I laughed softly and brushed his hair away from his face. "A monster?" He shook his head. "No, a man." Children say strange things. That is what we tell ourselves. They mix dreams with memories. They misunderstand things they can hear. They create stories because stories make the world easier to understand. So I did what every parent does. I checked. I lifted the blanket, crouched down, and looked beneath the bed. Nothing. A few toys, a missing sock, dust collecting along the baseboards. "See?" I said. Oliver looked past me toward the darkness. "He's not there, right?" I remember that sentence because it bothered me more than I admitted. Not because it sounded impossible, because he sounded certain. Over the next several weeks, the details changed slightly. That was what I expected. Children's stories evolve. But Oliver never changed the important parts. The man was quiet. The man didn't like being seen. The man waited until everybody was asleep. When I asked him what the man looked like, Oliver shrugged. "I don't know. How can you know someone is there if you can't see him?" He looked confused by the question. "Because I can hear him." My husband thought it was funny at first. "Tell him he needs to start paying rent," he joked. Oliver didn't smile. That was when I started telling my husband to stop joking about it. Not because I believed Oliver, because I didn't like seeing how serious he was. Then the little things started. The bedroom door I was sure I had closed would be open in the morning. The dog would sometimes stand in the hallway at night, staring towards the floor. Once, I found a muddy mark near the back door. I blamed my husband. He blamed me. We laughed about it because the alternative was admitting that we had no explanation. That was the easiest thing about being an adult. Everything had an explanation if you looked hard enough. Oliver eventually stopped talking about the man. That was what made me relax. One night, I tucked him in and waited for the usual question. He didn't ask me to check. The next night, he didn't ask either. After a week, I mentioned it casually. "You don't worry about the man anymore?" Oliver looked at me strangely. "No." "Why not?" He shrugged. "He left." I smiled. Good. But something about the way he said it stayed with me. He didn't sound relieved. He sounded like he was informing me of something. Months passed. The whole thing became one of those strange childhood memories parents tell each other about. The kind of story you laugh about later. Remember when Oliver thought someone lived under his bed? I almost forgot about it completely, until the morning my husband left for his fishing trip. He kissed us goodbye before sunrise and drove away. Oliver crawled into our bed afterward, still half asleep. We both eventually fell back asleep. I woke sometime around 8 to sound beneath us. A slow movement, a scrape. I opened my eyes. At first I thought it was the house. Old houses make noises. Wood expands. Pipes shift. Floors settle. Then I heard it again. A cough. Not from the hallway. Not from outside. Below us. I looked at Oliver. He was already awake, watching me. "I told you," he whispered. Every part of me wanted to believe there was another explanation. I grabbed my phone and called the police. The officers arrived quickly. They searched the house, checked the windows, examined the doors, and looked through every room. One officer even crouched beneath Oliver's bed. When he stood, he smiled gently. "Everything looks fine." I felt embarrassed. I apologized. I almost convinced myself I had imagined it. Then one of the officers walked around the side of the house. He stopped. "What is this?" Behind a row of bushes was a small wooden panel I had never noticed before. It wasn't part of the house. It looked older than everything around it. The officer opened it. The smell came first. Stale air, damp wood, something rotten. Inside was a narrow passage. The space was not large, but it had been used. There was a mattress, blankets, empty food containers, bottles of water, a flashlight, and dozens of pages carefully stacked in plastic bags. The police found notebooks, not one, dozens. At first, they assumed they belonged to the same person. Then they noticed the dates. Some entries were years old. Different handwriting appeared throughout the stacks, but the observations never changed. A mother hanging laundry, a father falling asleep on the couch, children playing in backyards, dinner conversations, arguments overheard through open windows, entire families documented with unsettling patience. The oldest notebook had been written nearly 20 years earlier. The newest ended only days before my husband left for his fishing trip. One detective quietly admitted they didn't think our family had been the first, or even the 10th. Then they began reading the pages about us. I expected to find Oliver's names everywhere. Instead, there was almost nothing about him. Every page was about me. How many times I checked the locks before bed, the mornings I cried in the shower after my father died, phone calls I had taken in the kitchen, conversations my husband and I had whispered after Oliver was asleep, details no stranger should have known, details I couldn't explain. The detective stopped reading aloud. He folded the page closed and looked at me with an expression I'll never forget. "He wasn't watching your son," he said quietly. "He was watching you." Near the bottom of the final notebook was a single sentence written more carefully than anything else. "The boy noticed me. She never did." We moved before the investigation was finished. The man was never found. What the police did find was something they never released publicly. Hidden among the notebooks were records from our other houses, other addresses, other families. Each notebook ended the same way. Eventually, the children stopped telling the adults. People still ask Oliver why he stopped talking about the man. They assume he grew out of it. They assume he finally realized there was nothing there. But that's not what happened. Oliver stopped trying to convince us. He realized long before I did that I was the one who wasn't listening. The police believed he had been living in hidden spaces beneath the houses for years, moving when he needed to, watching families who never realized they were sharing their homes with someone else. People still ask why Oliver stopped being afraid. They assumed he outgrew it. They assume he finally realized there was nothing there. But that's not what happened. Oliver stopped being afraid because he knew exactly where the man was. The rest of us just stopped believing in him. That story gets under my skin because it takes something every parent or caretaker has heard: a child insisting someone is in their room. And it asks one unsettling question: what if they were telling the truth? So now I'm curious. What's the creepiest thing a child has ever said to you that you still can't explain? Drop it in the comments below. I want to hear. And now it's time for something from our listeners, and this week I wanted to share an email from Alaya. Hi Blair, I really love your stories. I've been listening to Something Scary for years now, and I recently got my cousin hooked on it too. Anyway, here's my creepy encounter from my old house. It's not very long, but it still terrifies me to this day. For some context, I used to live in a townhome where all the bedrooms were upstairs. My grandma had moved in with me, my mom, and my dad, and she slept in our room on an air mattress upstairs. One afternoon, my mom picked me up from school, and we continued our tradition of listening to scary stories on the drive home. The story we listened to was about a man who moved into a new house and heard footsteps above him in the attic. Later, he found out they were just ghost children trapped up there trying to eat him. You'll understand why this is important later. That night, I was asleep and no one else in this house was awake. There was an attic door in the hallway between my room and my parents' room. I suddenly woke up around 3 or 4 in the morning and heard running and what sounded like a heavy metal ball rolling above me in the attic. At first, I thought it was probably just a squirrel, but the footsteps sounded heavy, like an adult's or maybe even kids. I started thinking it might have been my dad getting something from the attic, but then I remembered he was out of town for work. The metal ball sounded like it was rolling back and forth really fast, and the footsteps were moving just as quickly. I got anxious and woke my grandma up. The second she woke up, the rolling and footsteps completely stopped. I asked her if she had heard it too, but unfortunately she hadn't. I never heard the noises again, but I still wonder if listening to that story somehow made it come true. Probably just a crazy coincidence, but it still creeps me out to this day. Thank you, Blair, for reading my story. It means a lot. And thank you for sending it in. I love reading your stories. Sometimes the worst thing that can happen at a sleepover isn't who shows up. It's who was already there. This experience is shared by Behind You. People always ask why I hate sleepovers. I usually laugh and tell them I'm too old for them now, or that I just sleep better in my own bed. It's easier than telling the truth, because the truth sounds made up. This happened 3 years ago, the weekend before school started back up. The 4 of us had been planning that night for weeks. It was supposed to be one last real night together before homework, sports, and everyone's schedules took over again. We had everything planned. A late night movie downtown, pizza afterward, maybe walking around until our parents started texting us asking when we were coming home. Then the city announced a curfew. There had been another one of those teen takeovers downtown. A bunch of kids had broken into stores, climbed onto cars, and posted videos of the whole thing online like it was some kind of achievement. By lunchtime, every parent we knew had canceled their kids' plans. Our night was over before it started. Remy's mom felt bad for us, so she invited everyone over instead. She ordered 2 pepperoni pizzas, filled the basement fridge with soda, and promised she wouldn't bother us. At the time, it felt like the worst possible ending to summer. Looking back, I would give anything to go back to that boring night. Most of the evening was normal. That's the part that still bothers me. There wasn't some obvious warning, no strange feeling, no moment where one of us looked around and said, maybe we shouldn't be here. We were just 4 friends hanging out. We ate too much pizza. Someone spilled ranch on the carpet. Sarah complained about the movie because she always hated horror movies, but somehow always wanted to watch them. Sam kept stealing pepperonis off everyone else's slices whenever she thought nobody noticed. I remember those stupid little things better than I remember the important parts. That's how memory works, I guess. The storm outside kept getting worse. Rain hit the basement windows hard enough that we had to turn the TV volume up. Then the Wi-Fi started cutting out, and eventually we gave up on the movie completely. Sarah joked that the scariest thing that had happened to her all year was getting a B in Mr. Conroy's history class because her mom had almost killed her. We laughed. Someone threw a napkin at her. It was the last completely normal moment I remember. That's when Remy decided we should play a game. Remy was always finding weird things online. Haunted websites, supposedly cursed phone numbers, rituals people claim you should never try. She loved knowing things other people don't. She loved secrets, even fake ones. Most of us teased her about it. She never cared. She disappeared upstairs and came back with a large white candle in a glass jar. I remember noticing it smelled like vanilla before she even lit it. She called it the truth candle. The rules were simple. Everyone had to tell the scariest thing that had ever happened to them. Something real. No fake stories. No urban legends. No, my cousin's friend knew someone. According to whatever website Remy found, the candle would know if someone lied. None of us believed that. Not really. But we lit it anyway. Remy went first. She told us about something that happened when she was in 1st grade. She used it to draw all the time, until one afternoon when she drew a picture of a girl lying inside a wooden coffin. The girl had long blonde hair and her eyes were closed. Remy said her tutor arrived earlier than expected. so she left the drawing on the table and walked away. When she came back, the girl's eyes were open. That was it. Nothing else changed. Just the eyes. She said she tore the picture apart and never drew again. We laughed a little because, honestly, it sounded like something that would happen in a horror movie, but Remy didn't laugh with us. Looking back, I think that was the first strange thing. Not the candle, not the story. The way she watched our faces afterward, like she cared less about whether we believed her and more about whether we were afraid. The candle stayed lit. Sam went next. Her story was about the house she used to live in. For months, things had been disappearing. Snacks, small objects, things nobody remembered moving. Her family thought they were just being forgetful. Then one weekend, while they were away, their neighbor called the police. She had seen someone inside their house. Not outside, inside. The person had appeared in different windows throughout the night. The living room, Sam's bedroom, her parents' room. The police searched the house and found nothing. No broken windows, no signs of an intruder, no explanation. Sam was always the person who looked for the logical answer. She hated ghost stories. She hated when people jumped to conclusions. But even when she admitted she never figured out what happened, the candle flickered, but it didn't go out. Sarah went next. Her story was the strangest. She said she had been home alone one night when someone knocked on the door after midnight. When she looked outside, there were 2 children standing there, a boy and a girl. They said they were lost and needed to call their parents. They said they were cold. They asked to come inside. Sarah said she almost opened the door. Then she noticed something. Their eyes. They were completely black. The next day, she saw reports about other people in the area being visited by the same 2 children. Nobody knew who they were. Nobody knew where they went. The candle shook slightly, but the flame stayed alive. Then everyone looked at Sasha. I still think about that moment, because Sasha was never the dramatic one. She was the person who listened, the person who remembered birthdays, the person who noticed when someone was upset before they admitted it. She was the person everyone trusted. She smiled a little and started her story. She said it happened a few weeks earlier. She said she received a message in a group chat telling her to meet us at a coffee shop across the town. That wasn't unusual. We played stupid pranks on each other all the time. But when Sasha arrived, nobody was there. She thought we were messing with her, and it started raining. She stood outside the coffee shop, soaked through her clothes, checking her phone and wondering why nobody was answering. Then someone pushed her. Not bumped into her, not accidentally knocked into her. Pushed her. She fell into the street. The last thing she remembered was looking back. She saw someone standing behind her. Someone familiar. Someone she knew. Someone sitting in that basement with us. Nobody laughed. Nobody said anything, because Sasha wasn't telling a scary story. She was telling us what happened. The candle went out. All at once, the basement went completely dark. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then the temperature dropped, and a voice came from somewhere in the room. Not from the speakers, not from upstairs, just from everywhere. Only one story was true. Then lights came back on, and Sasha was gone. At first, we thought she was trying to scare us. We thought she had hidden somewhere upstairs. We thought she was finally getting revenge on all the times we had made fun of her. Then we noticed her phone was still on the coffee table. Her jacket was still beside her chair. She had never left. Underneath the candle, a folded piece of paper, a newspaper clipping. The article was dated 3 weeks earlier. It was about a teenage girl who had been killed in a hit and run. The police believed she had been pushed into traffic. The girl's name was Sasha. I don't remember much about what happened afterward. The screaming, the crying, the accusations, the police questions. What I remember most is looking at the other girls sitting beside me and realizing something. The candle had never asked us to tell the scary story that happened to us. It asked us to tell the truth. And only one person in that room had been lying. We never found out who killed Sasha. At least, that's what everyone says. But I still think about that night. I think about the 4 of us sitting around that candle. 4 girls, 4 stories. And one story nobody wanted to tell. The story of what happened when Sasha fell The story of the person standing behind her. The story of the killer sitting right beside me. And the worst part? I still don't know which one of us it was. We may never know who told the fifth story, but maybe that's what makes this one so disturbing, because sometimes the people closest to us are the ones hiding the darkest secrets. So tell us, if you were one of those girls, who would you have suspected? Drop your answer in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube at Snarled so you never miss an episode. And trust me, we're gearing up for spooky season. There's a lot of new things coming, and we can't wait to share. So make sure you hop over there and check out what's new. Until then, sweet screams. Has anyone else had a terrifying encounter involving something supernatural? Tell us your story by sending us an email at somethingscary@snarled.com. This week's podcast stories were edited by Sarah Lukasiewicz, narration by Blair Bathory, produced, edited, and mixed by Fitz Harris, executive produced by Gail Gilman, music by Sapphire Sindalo and Calvin Linderman. If you have a story you'd like to submit, send me an email at somethingscary@snarled.com. Don't forget to watch the video version of Something Scary over at youtube.com/snarled. And if you'd like to support the show and everything we do at Snarled, join our Patreon at patreon.com/snarled.